Hi, welcome to Film Ladder, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on film industry jobs. My name is Lexi, and I chat with creatives on what they do, how they got there, and how to excel. I am so excited to introduce today's guest. They have so much experience as a stand-in. Their credits include Marvel's The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Pain Hustlers, and the new Chad Powers. Kirsten Anderson, welcome to Film Ladder.
Thank you so much, Lexi. I'm so excited to be here.
So excited to have you on. All right, tell me all things stand-in. What is that role for people who don't know?
Okay, so a lot of people don't know what a stand-in is, but a stand-in is someone who typically matches the actor with hair color, height, complexion, and they're used to set up scenes so that the actor doesn't have to be there. They can go get other things done like hair and makeup or wardrobe. And the stand-in works with the camera and the lighting department and the director of photography in order to set up each scene so they can see what it's going to look like without having to have the actor there.
So I think this is a perfect role to break it down into a day. And I want all the details, like from when you get the call sheet to who you're reporting to you're on set. Like if you can give us a great rundown of that.
Okay, so each production is different. When I'm working on a production for a long term or a long period of time, for a couple months, I try and get on distro just because for me to have the call sheet is so helpful for me to do a good job. So if I know what the filming conditions are, if we're going to be filming outside or inside, then I can dress appropriately for it and be prepared. Or if I need to catch a shuttle from base camp, then I know how early I need to show up before my call time in order to be on set on time. So when I don't get a call sheet, a lot of times stand-ins are hired by the background casting agency.
Mm,
And a lot of times they won't give the call sheet out to background, of course, but even to the stand-ins. And for me, like it makes my job harder because I don't know where we're filming. I don't know if we're going to be outside or inside, and I don't know how early I need to get there in order to be on time. So if I'm on a production for a couple months, I will go to the production office and try and get on distro just so I have that information so that I can, make sure that I'm doing my job well. So I usually get the call time the night before. If I'm on distro, I will get the call sheet and I'll see it'll be listed on the front. So underneath where the actors are, it'll have stand-ins, photo doubles, or featured background, anyone like that. And it'll have a call time listed next to it. Sometimes you get a pre-call. So if production builds that in for you, it's like an extra 20 minutes so that you have time to go to catering
mm.
or catch a shuttle and you don't have to build that in yourself. So if I get a pre-call, then I know I have time to relax, go to catering, get a van, and get to set. So I usually get the call time the night before, so I know. And once I get to crew parking, I will either go to catering if I have enough time,
Mhm.
or I'll just catch a van straight to set. So I'll usually take a box of catering to go and just eat it on set when I get there because I'm not that organized to get there an hour early and just sit down and eat. So I'll take my bag. I usually have a bag that has 10 different shirts in it. And usually it's like black, white, gray, and then probably like 5 different colors, that I would envision the actor potentially wearing.
Oh, wow.
So then I will go to the wardrobe truck and ask them which color outfit the actor's wearing for the scenes that we're filming for that day and they'll usually have an idea, or if they don't know, they'll come and tell me later on. Some productions are very organized and they know what the actor's wearing for the entire week. So they have like a printout with the actor in each outfit of photos they've taken. And so then I know exactly what colors I need to bring for those scenes and for those days. So that's very helpful when they're super organized like that, because then I know what I need to bring and I don't have to bring like 20 shirts.
Wow.
So then I'll go to set. And once I get to set, I will touch base with the key PA, and they're usually the ones that have the sides for the day that they're handing out. So I'll get the sides, which are just the collection of scenes that we're filming for that day. And I'll highlight all of the lines that my actress has for each scene so I know exactly what we're about to shoot. And then after that, they'll go into a private rehearsal and usually that's with the director of photography, script supervisor, the actors, and maybe some department heads like props, grips, lighting, etc. So while they're doing a private rehearsal, I'll just kind of familiarize myself with the scene that we're going to be filming. And then once they're done with private rehearsal, they will call for marking rehearsal, which means that it's time for the stand-ins and the rest of the crew that needs to watch and see what's happening in the scene. They can come in and watch the rehearsal so they know what's going to happen. And this is, I would argue, this is the most important part for stand-ins to pay attention to, because you really need to be detail oriented when you watch the rehearsal. You need to see exactly what the actor does, when they do it, on which line, and which hand they pick up something with, left or right, because later on when you're filming a close up, the camera operator is going to ask you, okay, does she pick it up with her right hand or her left hand? And if you don't know, it can mess up the scene, because if they're here, if the camera's here over your shoulder and you pick it up with your right hand, it's going to block the camera. And so they need to be able to figure it out.
Right.
So hopefully you know exactly what the actor's doing. So once that happens, the actors will usually go finish getting ready with hair and makeup or wardrobe or getting wired. And that's when the stand-ins really come into play and work with the camera department, the camera operators, the lighting department, and the director of photography to really get that lighting honed in and make sure it's going to look good for the actors coming back into film. So basically, that's what we do for all the scenes throughout the day. And we'll break for lunch with the crew. And then as soon as they call wrap, it's nice because we don't have to load trucks or anything. We just get to hop in the van and go home.
You have to be so proactive on a lot of things, of finding out what the actor's wearing that day, of watching and seeing everything that they do, because no one's, it sounds like, paying attention to that, and they want you to do that. So my question is, what if you don't have the color that they're wearing that day? Does costumes provide something, or?
So, yes. I mean, it's just if I'm working on a show long term, I'll just bring my own clothes. And I
Yeah.
I always get cold on set, so I like to bring long sleeves. So, if you don't have that color, wardrobe is usually really good about providing a shirt that's similar to the one that the actor's wearing.
Okay.
I just, because I get so cold, I like wearing long sleeves, so I just like to wear my own clothes. But
Right.
but they're usually pretty good if someone is standing in for just a day and they don't have the clothes, then they give them a shirt. So it's not
Okay.
typically required that you bring shirts. I just prefer to do it just because, I like to wear my own clothes. But
Yeah. I mean, it just shows that you're such a expert at being a stand-in. Like, you have all the tips and tricks for it.
well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And then I know you've also told me before on set, like, sometimes when the actor comes in, maybe some things have changed. So do you also then relay things to the actor? Do they want to know, like, what went on, or they just kind of take their mark?
It really depends. And for me, it's just I have to be so good at reading my actor, whether I'm working with them for one day or for 3 months. So each one is different. I've worked with some actors that love to know what changed. They'll ask me, once they come in, if anything has changed or if there's anything they need to know. A lot of times I'll watch out for safety too. Like if there's something they're going to trip on, like a stand that was put there that wasn't there for rehearsal, I will just make sure that they know that that's there so they don't trip when they're rehearsing, because that's different. But yeah, it just depends on the actor. Some of them don't like to receive notes. So I try and make sure that I'm aware of that, and I will not relay things to them if that's their preference or if it seems like that's their preference, because, I don't want to. Also, I don't want to interfere with their process and things like that.
Okay, another question I have is, what else do you bring to set other than your suitcase with clothes? Because from what you keep explaining, it's almost like a one-man band. Like, there's not really anyone, or is there someone wrangling you? I know that ADs do, but no one's really in charge of you. Does that make sense? Like, I
Yeah.
just feel like you're making sure you're where you need to be at what time, and in doing everything you need to based off your own knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of weird because stand-ins kind of fall into the category of kind of being crew, but also kind of being under like the background art because they're booked by extras casting.
Mm-hmm.
So usually there's a PA or the key set PA that will, you know, kind of direct us to a place that's good to put our stuff down, or will just kind of be overarching in charge of us, but not really. So you really do need to be on your mark, essentially. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be in charge of knowing when you need to be, where you need to be. And just, I think that's why so many people don't realize everything that goes into being a stand in, because there's so many terms that you learn while working on set that guide you to know when you're needed. So if they're
Mm-hmm.
yelling, okay, turning around, like that's a good indication that you're probably going to be needed because we're going to do a new setup. So there's things you learn along the way that just doing it for one day, you won't know those terms or anything like that. So it takes time to get to know that. But I think for me, my essentials, I always bring a pen. I always take notes on my sides if the actor changes something or little details I'm worried I'm going to forget. So I always bring a pen. I try and bring a rechargeable um, external battery for my phone because that usually dies when you're doing 14-hour days. Water
Yeah.
bottle in case there's no water. I mean, there usually is, but in case you're outside or something. Comfortable shoes, or if my actress is taller than me, I will wear lifts in my shoe. So I'll bring those with me. And if I'm standing in for multiple people that day, which sometimes happens,
Mm.
I'll
Oh my
change
gosh.
those in and out to make sure I'm like a close enough height for the actor. And it really depends on the director of photography how much they care about the height, or if they, if it's helpful for them to see the height. Sometimes they need it, sometimes they don't. So
And how much do they I wonder if this is different in every production you do, but how much do they want your hair and maybe like makeup to be similar to the actors?
gosh, it really just depends. Some DPs are more particular than others. So, uh, for example, when I was on The Resident, I did season 1, and I'm naturally a brunette, so like this is my natural color. I haven't dyed my hair in a while. And I did the whole first season. I was standing in for a brunette. So then I got a call the day before season 2 started filming, and they asked if I was available for the next 9 months of filming. But they
So
asked
nice.
me, I know, right? I'm like, okay, great. But they asked me how soon I could be blonde because they wanted me to stand in
Mm.
for the lead female on the show, and she was blonde. And I was on a different set. So I ended up leaving that set early, booking a hair appointment to dye my hair blonde because it was going to be 9 months. If it's something shorter, like 2 months or something, like, I probably would have just gotten a wig or something.
Hmm.
But because it's 9 months and it ended up turning into 4 more seasons after that, I just dyed my hair blonde just to make it easier.
Wow.
So I dyed my hair and just stayed blonde for the next 5 years, which was crazy. So it just depends on the production. Some productions only have 3 stand-ins for the whole show and they use them for everyone. So
Wow.
sometimes I think it comes down to budget and if they can afford to get the number of stand-ins for the actors. And sometimes I think they just stick to 3 people who they think are going to be a good fit for multiple actors.
Wow. I mean, that's so interesting because, like you're saying, they try to find somewhat similarities in height, skin complexion. It's
Mhm.
just like when budget's involved, now that's like kind of out the
It's
window, it
kind of thrown
sounds.
out the window. Yeah, exactly. So it just depends, but yeah, it's definitely interesting. Sometimes they care and sometimes they don't care at all. So it just really depends on the production.
So then, what would you say is a common misconception about the role?
Wow, this is one I think that it depends on where you are. I think in LA and New York, it's different versus Atlanta because LA and New York stand-ins are SAG. So
Mm.
a lot of times the stand-ins are actors who have been on set who are familiar with everything and they are in SAG. You have to be in SAG. Um, and then in Georgia, it's a right to work state. So you do not have to be SAG. So you don't have to have any experience essentially for them to like pull you and put you in like on a show. So I think one of the misconceptions about being a stand-in is that it's an easily fillable position.
Mm.
And a lot of times production will pull stand-ins from background if they need an extra stand-in for the day and they'll bump them up into a stand-in position, which is fine because that's the way you get experience. I mean, when I first started out, that's how I got my first stand-in role was doing background and they pulled me to stand in for an actress. So then I had that experience. But
Mhm.
I think so many times they think it's just an easily fillable position where they can just pull someone in just to like stand there on the mark, but there's so much more involved in being a stand-in. And the job of being a stand-in is really to save production time. So you're setting up the shots while the actor's not there so that it's as if the actor was there so they can save time in setting up the scenes. And I think when you have someone that's never worked on a set before that they pull into that position, it doesn't always save time. And I've seen it happen before where the crew gets frustrated because that person doesn't know what they're doing and they call action and the person just standing there. They, haven't watched the rehearsal. They're not sure what to do. And then they have to reset the crane and the camera to go again and explain to the person, this is what you need to do. So I think the common misconception is that it's an easily replaceable job, and it's not. Like, there's so many nuances of the job, and being a good stand-in takes time to learn, all of the skills that you need in order to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, seeing rehearsals and when they do those crane movements and then you're walking and talking and then you have to stop here at this mark and the pace of it, even like you guys are
Mm,
talking and I can see that you kind of understand the lines. Obviously, you've been looking at them and highlighting them. So you guys do have to know so much. Like you're saying, it's not just stand here, as the name says, stand in.
right.
You guys are like acting it out, but in a way that's so technical. And then they're asking you, okay, pause. Okay, this isn't working. Okay, now go back. So like you guys are doing a
Exactly.
lot.
Yeah, and the pacing is something that's so important, especially with Steadicam. If you're going faster than the actor's going, it's gonna be completely different than if they're walking a slow walk and talk. And so you have to also pay attention to that. And I think that's one of the hardest things as well, is the pacing. It's just something that you kind of learn over time, and or I count beats in my head to try and make sure I'm on the same, pace. Because
Hmm.
for me, that's something that's hard. If I'm working with Steadicam, I really have to be on it, and I have to make sure that that pacing is, the same exact pacing as my actor is doing while doing the lines. And doing the lines, I think in Atlanta, it's not so much a requirement. I don't know. I think in LA and New York, it's more of a requirement, but
Mm,
it really just depends on the show and kind of what their expectations are. Because when I was on The Resident, that was the expectation, is that your rehearsal, the second team, which is what stand-ins are called, second team actors
hmm.
are the first team. The second team rehearsals were full blown rehearsals. It was like lines, dialogue, like all the actions, the pacing, everything. It was just as if
Wow.
it was filming a scene. So you really you really do need to know what the production is expecting. Whereas some productions, they won't have you do the lines at all. They'll just be like, okay, go to your second mark, go to your third mark. So it really just depends.
How much are they looking for you to mimic how much they're acting? Like, say it's a very frustrating scene for the actor, angry, like
Mm.
they're yelling. Like, how much are they looking for you to hit your mark or also act out how closely they're doing it?
So I would kind of say that's up to you
Okay.
as the stand-in. There have been times where, I mean, there's scenes where there's yelling, obviously, and you don't have to do that as a stand-in. Like, you're not required to do that. I technically think you're not even required to do the lines, but sometimes they'll have you do them, or they'll
Yeah.
ask you to do them. So
Yeah.
for me, now that I've been doing it for so long, I enjoy doing scenes like that because I'm like, oh, this is a challenge. Like, I'm gonna like just go all out because I think it's fun to
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
So I was working on an independent movie a couple years ago. I don't even know if it ever came out, but um but there was a scene where my actress was yelling and like the guy has to come over and restrain her and she's like, kicking and trying to get out of it. And so
Uh-huh.
I was like, "Oh, I'm just going to go all out on this. Like, I'm just going to like just pretend like I'm in it." So the first AD, the first AD was the one that was like, ended up standing in for the guy that was like restraining her. And we start the scene, they yell action. I'm like running out, I'm screaming, and he's like trying to contain me and stuff. And then one of the other actors who was in the scene, he ran out because he was like, he thought he was missing the rehearsal and everything because he thought it was the real thing just because, I was screaming and
That's
stuff. And
so
he like thought
funny.
he was missing, his mark. So um, but yeah, I personally just enjoy getting to kind of like show my range and things like
Uh-huh.
that because you don't get to do that very often. So when you have a scene where it's like the stakes are
Uh-huh.
high, um, it's just for me like that's enjoyable to get to, kind of act and do.
So there's not really a right or wrong.
Not really, unless
Okay.
the director specifically like comes up to you and like gives you a note or
Yeah.
something and you're like, "Oh gosh, I didn't,"
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I've only really had that I can think of, I've only really had it be a positive experience when I kinda go all out and stuff like that. And I mean, that's, I would say, like with Pain Hustlers, like that's kind of how it came to be. Because during the camera test of that, they had me laying on the ground screaming into the camera pretending to give birth. And so they knew I could
Oh, wow.
scream. And so then the role that I ended up getting on the show was a screaming mom. And so I think the more you're
Oh,
willing to kind of show those emotions in that
yeah.
range, I think the more people are going to take notice. And I don't think you can really go wrong with that. Like, I think,
Hmm.
it really can turn into other opportunities.
And then who's directing you with pacing with, because I know like obviously things are really massaged out once you have, just the first rehearsal with the first team, and then you guys come in and now they're working out all the details and, oh, this is working, this is not, like, but to my knowledge, a lot of the time director sits back and lets the crew have the set. So who's directing you on these paces and whatnot?
So, primarily, the director of photography is the one who is most involved, I would say, with running the second team rehearsals.
Okay.
And the director is sometimes there watching. They'll bring them in just to watch once they kind of get the rehearsal finalized.
Hmm.
But for the most part, the director of photography, I think, is running the rehearsal, making sure the lighting looks the way they want it to look, making sure the cameras are in the right spots. And then when it's a steady cam, I'm working very closely with the steady cam
Mm.
operator. So I think mostly it's the director of photography and the camera operators that I'm closely working with. And then they will pull the director in for any notes that they want to change once they kind of have it dialed in and where it's looking like it's going to be ready.
So, I mean, just from that, knowing the Steadicam operator, the DP, all of these people, as well as the terms of, okay, turning around, new setup, things like that, that you're like, okay, thinking, do I have time to go to the bathroom? Do I have time to go to Crafty? What,
Mm.
like, hearing these terms allows you to be a better stand in. And it just shows that there's so much more to being a
Yeah,
stand in than just some random
exactly.
person coming in.
Yeah, and you have to, like what you were saying, who is in charge of us, like you really have to be in charge of yourself and knowing exactly where you need to be. And if you do have time to go to the bathroom, and like that's a decision that you have to make, because there have been times where I'm like, oh, cool, I've got, 10 minutes. And then it turns out they change things so quickly. I'm in the bathroom and they're looking for me, like, where is she? So I always tell someone, regardless, like if I'm going somewhere, just in case that happens, because there's been times where that's happened and I think that I have enough time and then I don't. So you really do have to be in charge of your own timing and making sure that you go to Crafty, go to the bathroom at opportune times when you have enough.
Let's rewind, and I want to know your first in on a film set.
So, growing up, I had always been fascinated by TV and film, and I had always wanted to be an actor. I just thought it was the coolest job. But I didn't really know how to get there, and I was pretty shy, and I had a lot of stage fright, especially in high school. I was very quiet and timid. I didn't like to speak during class. I was just not outgoing at all. So I had actually auditioned for one play in high school for Les Miserables, and I did the audition. I had worked so hard. I'd practiced, and it was singing a song. And I got on stage and I panicked and I just completely messed up the song and the timing and the pacing, and it was not good.
Oh no.
Um, I didn't even get a role in the entire play. I didn't even get an ensemble. Like it was bad. It was bad. So I think that really put me off for a long time. I was like, okay, I'm not cut out for this or theater or anything like that. So it took me a couple of years to kind of, get past that. And I think in college, I kind of came more out of my shell and became more outgoing. I did a couple like small plays then, and then I ended up doing a big production, a big theater production, and really kind of felt myself getting more comfortable on stage at that point. So when I decided to kind of take the leap into pursuing working in the film industry, I was 25 years old and I was working, it's kind of random. I was working in Australia at a marketing or doing marketing at an architecture firm.
So fun.
And I know, so crazy. And I was sitting at my desk and I would always see everything that was filming in Atlanta. And I was just yearning to kind of be in that industry because I just wasn't feeling fulfilled. I thought to myself, by the time I'm 30, I can either get permanent residency, stay in Australia and have this life here, or I can kind of just take a leap of faith and move to Atlanta and pursue working in the film industry and see if anything comes of it. So that's what I decided to do. And it was a super intimidating decision, but I'm so grateful that that's what happened. And so the first week that I was in Atlanta, I had booked 15 days on Pitch Perfect 3 as a background extra. And to me,
Wow.
that was the most exciting thing because I had grown up watching Pitch Perfect. Like I knew what the movie was. I knew who Rebel Wilson was, Anna Kendrick, and all of them. And I was like, this is a huge film set. Like this is such a cool opportunity. So I made it on that set and I was doing 15 days of background and it was all very exciting. And the last couple weeks of filming, I got pulled to be a stand-in for Ruby Rose, who was in the movie, and then just some of the Bellas who were there as well. They needed extra stand-ins. So that was really my first time ever working as a stand-in or really finding out what a stand-in did.
So when you were in Australia and you're like, okay, I want to go to Atlanta, did you then just start looking up background agencies, or how did you even get the background job?
So I grew up in Colorado and then when I was in college, I went on exchange to Australia. And then I moved back to Colorado after I graduated from college and then worked a couple random jobs. But while I was in Colorado, I had submitted to be a background extra on the Hunger Games because I had heard about that. I had like one family friend who lived in Atlanta. And so I had heard about that. So I had applied to do that, but I didn't get it. And then they contacted me as I had decided to move back to Australia to work. And so then I was like, well, sorry, I can't do it. So I still had been following all of these pages of background extra casting companies that were in Atlanta. And so I would constantly see all the updates about all the movies that were filming here. And so I still kind of had tabs on it and knew like what was happening and still kind of had that desire to work in the industry, but it had been put on hold. So
Walk me through now, how do you get more jobs as a stand-in, or how do you sell yourself as a stand-in? And like, it's all through background casting. So is this what you're talking to those casting directors about, or can you just explain that world?
yeah, absolutely. So the first year I was here, Pitch Perfect 3 was the first thing I did. And that entire year, I did a culmination of background and stand in. Basically, the background extras casting sites are on Facebook a lot of times, and they will post things that they're looking for, like descriptions of what they're looking for. They need a stand-in who's 5'3", who's a brunette, or like a tall, like African American 6'3" guy who resembles a football player or something. So they would list that out, and then if you fit that description, then you will email in pictures and your phone number and just some information about you, your height, weight, like clothing sizes, etc., shoe sizes. And then they will reach out to you if they're interested, if you fit that description and they think that you're a good fit. But a lot of times they will ask for your experience standing in. So sometimes it helps to have like a couple shows under your belt. But primarily the way that I got jobs standing in was from looking at the Facebook accounts on Extras Casting and just submitting myself to those casting calls. And sometimes, though, they will pull you from set to be a stand-in. So that's happened to me before, too. And that whole first year, I was doing anything and everything I possibly could to be on set just because I wanted to learn all the ins and outs of how it worked. So I did background on, I don't know, probably like 50 shows and movies that year because it was super busy. And so just anything and
Great
everything I was
times.
saying yes to. Yeah, exactly.
Great times in Atlanta.
Pre-COVID, pre-strike. But I was kind of just saying yes to anything and everything just so I could absorb all of the information possible. And it wasn't until later that year, it was August, and I had signed up to do background on The Resident. And it was their second episode. I ended up getting a featured background role. And I found out they needed a stand-in for one of the actresses on the show. So I submitted for that. I saw it online and submitted for that and ended up booking it. So they had me standing in through Central Casting. They were doing The Resident at the time. and they had me standing in for this actress that was on there for that entire first season. But she was only working 2 or 3 days a week. So I just never knew what the schedule was gonna be, and I had to
Mm.
clear out Monday through Friday and just hope that they would call me in for a couple days each week. And the hard part was back then was if you said no, a lot of times they would just replace you. If you weren't available for one day, they would call someone else in, and then that work person would be the new stand-in. So it
Wow.
just felt really like your job was in jeopardy if you didn't say yes. And so for me, I cleared out my Monday through Friday and I was working retail on the weekends just to kind of supplement for that. I did that whole entire first season standing in for her.
Wow, that's so hard, I bet, to navigate because are you saying if that actress isn't there that day, then you're not called in? So then I'm assuming you
hmm
don't get paid. It's not like a weekly strip end, it's just a daily rate that you get paid if you're there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's usually
Wow.
the rate is usually a little bit more than background. For stand-in, it's a little bit more, but it's nothing like the crew rate. So, like, I
Mhm.
also do props, and when I'm doing props, I get paid a lot more than when I'm standing in. So
Yeah.
it depends. But yeah, if the actor's not there for a day, you're usually not there unless they need some utility person just to kind of stand in for random people here and there, day players. So
Wow. Do they give you any information on how much of a lead the person you're gonna be a stand-in is for? Like saying yes to a job, but you're like, I actually don't know how much I'm gonna be working, like, should I say yes to this? Is there any information given?
sometimes, usually if it's for the lead actress or lead actor, they will put that in the notes just so you know it's going to be a full-time thing. So they'll usually post a couple, maybe like a week or two before production is ramping up, looking for a full-time stand-in for that run of show. They will usually put it in if it's like the lead actor, the number one or number two, like they'll put that in usually. But apart from that, sometimes you won't even get a heads up as to how often that character is gonna be on the show, so you don't really know.
Do a lot of stand-ins wanna act? Is that kind of the goal? It's like start as background, you get the knowledge. Hopefully, you can get pulled to a stand-in because you get such one-on-one experience with the camera and with staging and whatnot. And then is that kind of the goal for most people is to be an actor?
I would say for a lot of people, stand-in is kind of like the bridge to becoming an actor because you do learn so much. I do have friends that are stand-ins that don't wanna be actors. It just kinda
Okay.
depends. But I would say for, like, the majority of people who do stand-in work, that is the goal because you do absorb so much information. It's a complete masterclass on acting, and you get to watch all of these actors and see what they do, and it's sometimes I would argue that it's more beneficial than some of the classes that I've taken
Mhm.
acting class-wise. I think you learn from both, but I would say being on set is really where you absorb all of that information and you really learn everything. Like it's just there's things that you learn on set that are not taught in class that I've seen actors come in from LA who were there for a day or two. Their experience on set is not as extensive because they audition and then they book a role and then they're on set for like one day. And so when
Mhm.
I'm spending 9 months on a set, I'm learning so much that I wouldn't be learning if I was just auditioning for a show and then coming on 1 or 2 days for that show.
I mean, we talked about a lot of the time it's just experience. I mean, there's no formal handbook. So when you had questions, who are you asking if, different terms and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with some really amazing stand-ins. As I started out, I was asking them questions, but a lot of it is really just learning on the job. It just really depends on the set.
Okay, this is kind of a pop quiz question. Like, what are some terms? Someone that's listening that wants to be a stand-in, they're like, okay, wait, which terms should I know?
Okay, moving on is probably like the most important one because that just is, it can mean you're moving on to a different scene, you're moving on to a different setup. So that's probably like one of the most important ones. Turning around, also a good one because they've already shot footage from one direction. Now they're going to flip the set, shoot it from the other direction. Things are going to move, but they're going to expect you to be there to help set up the lighting for that specific direction and that setup. Second team, that
Mm,
refers to stand-ins, and they will yell out for a second team, so
right.
always be listening for that because that is probably the most important. I think those are really the most important ones.
Yeah.
I can kinda tell when by watching Video Village, if the director of photography is about to move on to a different setup. So I will kind of just watch and see if people are moving, if the actors come out. If my actress comes off of set, that's usually an indication that I'm probably going to be needed. So I just make sure that I'm really close. And if they need me, I'll pop in. But it's really about knowing the like movements. You kind of get a rhythm of like they do a wide shot and then change setups and do a close up one direction, the close up another direction, and then a couple other setups depending on what they want to do.
It's another question I have of being in charge of yourself. You kind of get to choose where you wait, or are you told when you come in, like, oh, here's like an area for the stand-ins or whatnot? How much is that thought through?
So a lot of times I'll get there before camera gets in because my call time is usually before them. And I will scope out like a good spot to put. I bring my own chair, like my little camping chair, just, because they don't provide chairs for us. So I just like to make sure if I'm, outside or if we're filming late, I have somewhere to sit. Or if I have a scene off, then I can just sit in my chair and read or something.
Mhm.
But I will scope out good places that I think are close enough to set or close enough to Video Village where I can watch the scenes. But a lot of times the place I pick is like one of the best spots. And so then camera will come in and they're like, oh, we need to be here. So then I'll have to move.
Of
So
course.
you basically just have to be prepared to move at any time when a department comes in and they're like, hey, we need this spot. So you kind of are
Right.
just, moving around constantly. But if you pick a spot that's like out of the way, usually we're in charge of it. But sometimes the PA will come over and they'll be like, we're going to have you guys sit over here. And so they'll have it kind of scoped out for you. But yeah, it just depends really. Like each set is so different.
It's like you never know what you're gonna get when
You
you
really, you really
like
don't.
most crew, but I feel like
Yeah.
especially you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious what different personality types, characteristic traits like that you think really fit in a stand-in role.
You have to be very self-aware. I think that is a big one. I've worked with people they've pulled to stand in who have never been on a set before. And then they just start talking to the actor and like, it's doesn't, I don't know.
Mm,
It's just, it doesn't go down well. And so you just really have to be self aware. Listening is a big one. If I'm on my mark, I'm usually not talking unless I have dialogue. And usually it's opposite someone else. Usually the marks are like close to each other, or if you have multiple people in a scene, they're like relatively close to each other. So sometimes I'll be standing on my mark and I'll always be listening because I learn so much information about what's happening, maybe in that scene or just in general, from being able to hear the director of photography, the first AD talking and discussing something if they're going to change the scenes. Like there's so much information that you get just by being in the middle of set. So a lot of times I will just try and listen to everything that's going on so I'm aware of what's happening. Um, Sometimes there will be people that haven't stood in before and they'll just be very chatty and they'll just want to talk the entire time while you're on your mark. And I think sometimes it's a little bit disruptive because you have the director and the director of photography trying to work something out. So I think you just really have to be self-aware and just pay attention to detail.
mm,
That's a huge one. Making sure you watch exactly what the actor's doing. Like I said, I take notes. Not everyone does, but because I'm so worried I'm going to forget something, if they pick up something with their left hand, or I always make sure I know which dominant hand my actor writes with. So,
mm.
different shows, they've been left-handed, which I'm left-handed, different shows, they're right-handed. So I just try and make sure that I know that detail and just paying attention. I mean, really, just that's a huge part of the job is just, making sure if anything changes. Just watching the monitors. A lot of times people that are pulled to stand in won't know that they need to watch the monitor to see if the actor changes anything because so many times things change. The actor will come in, they'll do a rehearsal after, getting hair and makeup and wired and everything. And they'll decide, oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to do it this way. And if you don't watch that, you're not going to get that. You're going to come in for the next setup. And then the camera operator is going to be like, they didn't do that in the
Oh my
last
gosh,
scene. So
yeah.
then you're going to look like you don't know what you're doing. So,
Right. Oh, we didn't even talk about that. Yeah, I'm sure of just, okay, you get this wide, and then it's very important you see every movement that they do because now they're handling props, they're touching things, they're acting. And so when it gets into the close up, yeah, that's very important to know. I didn't
yeah.
even, it's not just, hey, you're on set now. Okay, now go away. Okay, now come back. And now, it's
Right.
like, no, you have to be aware of what the actor's
Exactly. And I
doing.
can give people a rundown. Like if they're, if they pull them from background and they're like, hey, can you just like tell them what, yeah, I can give you a quick rundown, but it's not going to be everything you need to know in order to do a good job. Like it's going to be as much as I can tell you, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be, perfect. You're not going to know how to be a stand-in based off of just like one day of standing in. It just takes
Right.
time to learn.
And I'm thinking, of course, the director of photography who's now going in for a close up would just hope you would know all the movements, right? Because they don't have time to like want to tell you, oh no, this
Right.
is this hand, this hand. Like I'm sure they are really appreciative and know when a stand in has been a stand in before.
Yeah, and I think that's like when I've worked with the same AD multiple times and they recommend me for a job, I think it's for that reason because I do try and pay attention as much as I can and do a good job and take notes and really be on it like when I'm there and do a good job. And so I think they really do appreciate that. And I've had, when I was doing Falcon Winter Soldier, I had the first AD, he told me, you know what, I know you don't match some of the characters that you're standing in for, but I would much rather have someone that knows what they're doing than matches that actor
Mm,
exactly.
is a hard truth of the job.
That's a good question. Sometimes the most uncomfortable thing when you're standing in is you're standing across from someone and you have to like keep your eye contact. Like you have to keep your eye line like looking
Yeah.
into their eyes and like sometimes that's uncomfortable. Like we don't do that in normal life. Like we don't just stare at someone for 30 minutes like this. Like that's like it's kind of weird. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just things like that. But I think for me, like one of the hardest truths is that like standing in, yes, it opens doors. And I think it's so crucial in terms of networking. You meet so many people and make so many connections. But sometimes it's hard when I also want to be like having a role on set too. And I think
Hmm.
that's like one of the hard aspects of it is, ultimately my goal is not to be a stand in for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
Like, acting is the goal. But I still think I think there's so many benefits to the networking that you get from standing in and the amount of, things that you do learn from it. So.
And do you ever get offered to audition for roles on the show? Has that ever opened that door?
It has, and, like, that's definitely been some really, like, pivotal moments for me, and the first time it happened was on Pain Hustlers. I was standing in for Emily Blunt. It was a 2.5-month movie that we were filming, and I was working really closely with the director, David Yates, and he's incredible, like, he's done some of the Harry Potter films, like,
Hmm.
amazing, amazing director, like, very chill, very calm, never, like, yells or anything.
Yeah.
And he would have me and the guy that was standing in for Chris Evans, we would set up a lot of the scenes before Emily and Chris would come in, so he could get an
Mm.
idea of it, and then we would kind of relay that to them what he had asked us to do for the scene.
Hmm.
So I got to know him really well, and I really tried to emulate like her character when I was standing in. And I think he took notice of that. And we got to the last 2 weeks of filming, and he and I were chatting, and he said, "You know what? I want to get you into the movie like before we
Mm.
finish." And which was so exciting. I mean, I didn't know if it was going to happen,
Yeah.
but they ended up giving me a role for a screaming mom,
Nice.
which was a SAG role. It was my first SAG role, and that for
Yeah.
me was amazing because it was just kind of a testament to all the hard work. And that was about 4 or 5 years after I'd started. So,
Wow.
I had learned so many things and I felt like I was, getting this amazing opportunity and it was paying off and it was just such an amazing experience. But yeah, I've had great opportunities of working with directors and they know who I am. And then if I get an audition for a show that they're working on, then, we have that connection. Or one of the first ADs I worked with, and he was gracious enough to tell me if I got an audition on that show, he would make sure that the producers, saw it because I was working on the show. And so like that, things like that, I'm just so grateful for because those connections are so invaluable.
So, any last piece of advice that you have for someone wanting to have a career in this industry?
Wow, I mean, be in it for the long haul. I mean, it's not an overnight thing. People think that, it's easy to kind of just become an overnight success or, just say, oh, I want to do this. And then it happens and it takes a lot of time. I mean, I'm 8 years in and I feel like I'm like kind of starting to get some traction and it's, yeah, you definitely have to be in it for the long haul and it's hard to stay encouraged and motivated. But I think that the more that you work on set and network with people, like the more opportunities you're going to get. So I think valuing that is just imperative to being in this industry. Um, I guess, let me think something else. I guess you kind of have to be prepared to work the long hours. A lot of times people don't realize how much work goes into creating a show or a movie. And oftentimes it's 14-hour days. You're Monday through Friday, a lot of overnight sometimes. Sometimes you're outside.
I feel like that's another hard truth is, wherever the actor is acting that day, whatever set, you too are in those conditions. And it can be hot, it can be cold. It's just crazy what
Yeah,
you guys have to stand in.
it's true. I'm
No pun
trying to think
intended on
of
that.
like, I'm trying to think of interesting experiences. I mean, of course, like now they have intimacy coordinators and stuff on set, which is helpful. But yeah, people don't realize like the stand-ins, they don't have to do like the actual kissing scene, like part of the scene, but
Right.
you're really close to the other person you're standing in with.
Oh my
Sometimes,
gosh.
you guys are
Right.
like laying in the bed together and usually they're pretty good about making sure you're feeling comfortable with everything that you're doing, but it's not always going to be like that. So sometimes you kind of have to like stick up for yourself or talk to an assistant director if there's something that you're not comfortable with or things like that. Because at the end of the day, like you're not the actor. So you shouldn't be expected to do everything that they're doing when it comes to intimacy and things like that.
Right. I didn't even think about that. Oh my gosh.
I
You're
know.
right. Like, what if there's a whole scene now he goes on top of her and things like that. Like,
Yeah.
you're just,
And there's definitely
yeah.
been some situations where like, it's crazy. You're very close with the person that you're standing in with. So
Sure, you guys
sometimes
become
I'll get
great
to a
friends.
set and be like, "Hey, I'm Kirsten. Nice to meet you." And then we'll go into a scene like that where you're just like, very like close together and,
Yeah. So
sometimes it
you,
can be kind of uncomfortable.
you just never know what you're gonna get. It's a full journey. You never know the conditions.
You really don't.
And
No,
you don't get
exactly.
the sides till that morning, right? Like, I'm sure they're not
Usually it
sending
depends on the
you.
set. Sometimes like if I get on distro, I'll get them the night before. On The Resident, it was great because they would give it to us like when they would send it out to with revisions and stuff. So we would kind of ahead of time know, but they also kind of expected us to do the full rehearsal. So it was helpful to have that ahead of time to kind of be prepared for what you were going to do.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, sometimes it's the day of that you get the sides and you're like, okay, this is what we're doing today.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, I've had friends that have never stood in before, got a stand-in job, and it ended up being like a sex scene or something or a kissing scene. And they're like, I didn't know what I was getting into. They didn't tell me. And
Oh my
so a lot
gosh.
of times if I'm standing in on stunt unit, I won't do anything because they've got the actor there sometimes, the stunt performer, and then me to stand in sometimes. And then sometimes a photo double too. So it sometimes there's like three or four of us. And so, a lot of times if I'm standing in on a second unit, I won't do much for that day. But I get to watch all of the cool stunts, which is
Yeah.
always exciting because when you're talking about something like Marvel, it's like that's insane, like the stuff that they do.
I guess what's different for you is a lot of the other guests that I have, it's so important to network, network, network. And I feel like, I guess, since you have a case where you're getting hired from background agencies that aren't on set, then who are you necessarily networking with on set? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's the assistant directors, whether it's like
Okay.
a second or like a first. If I've worked on a show with them, then they kind of know my work ethic and hopefully that means that they think of me on another show if they need someone that fits my description.
Yeah.
And I have had that happen a couple times. And when it does, I'm really, really thankful for it. And I've had like a couple ADs like reach out and text me or call me and be like, hey, are you available to work on this show? And, we'd really love to have you and things like that. So I think for me, a lot of times that's important. it's weird. Stand-ins, I guess, are somewhat under the AD department because that's like, yes, they're listed as under the AD department, but they're not part of the AD department. So it's kind of a weird line, but I guess
Yeah.
that's who we really most interact with, when we do come to set. So yeah, getting to know the ADs, I think, is really important. When I did The Resident, we did 23 episodes, which is now like really unheard of. You don't shoot that many
Yeah.
episodes, but
Yeah.
you would work with a different director for almost every episode. So,
Wow.
and you work closely with them. So I've worked with a couple directors multiple times on different shows. And so then you kind of get to know them. And I think that's important too, if you do want to have like, an acting career, because they're going to be involved with that. So yeah, but I really interact with so many of the departments, camera especially. Like I get to know and work with some of the same camera operators, which is great too. DP is another one actually, because sometimes they'll bring on stand-ins for a show. If they start a show and they really like your work ethic, they'll bring you to the next show. And sometimes they have the say, if you're doing a camera test and there's 5 of you, the DP a lot of times will be the one that picks the person that's going to be standing in for that actor.
Oh, wow. That's good to know. So just to do a little recap. So you're saying to get into this role, go to a background casting, get your name in there, start applying for those different jobs. But when you see a forum or on Facebook that they're looking for those specific things, go that route of trying to submit yourself that way versus sometimes you may be bumped up from background, but that route is less common than when they're directly asking, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that
Okay.
paying attention on Facebook, also making sure it's reputable. um, they, on their Facebook pages, will list different characteristics they're looking for in a stand-in. So if you see that, go ahead and submit yourself for it. Sometimes you will be upgraded as background to stand-in, but yes, it is less common. I think going the route of looking on Facebook to see those castings, and then you can create a profile. I know with central casting, you can create a profile online with like a picture and all your information, and then they'll reach out to you if you match the description of a show that they're looking for or something. So I think you can do that as well. But if
Yeah.
you also just Google like background casting Atlanta, there should be some that pop up too. Extras casting Atlanta is one. I'm kind of blanking right now on some of the casting tailor
Yeah.
made, but
And then, I mean, I have a lot of listeners that aren't even in Atlanta. So the other way is SAG, you're saying. So in other
so
states like New York and California.
yes, depending on the state that you're in, sometimes stand-ins are SAG. I know in LA and New York they are. I don't know about some of the other states, but if you look online, it should be able to tell you.
Okay.
But yes, if you're in LA and New York, you will need to join SAG in order to be a stand-in on most major productions.
Wow.
Definitely SAG productions, like TV shows and movies. So sometimes I think you can sign up. I think maybe the best way for that is to sign up with Central Casting, since they do SAG background in those states. And then you're at least getting on set. And if you I think you have to get 3 days of SAG background in order to be able to join SAG. And then you got to pay the dues. I think in LA and New York, it's about 3,000 or so.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, it is.
Ah.
If you I know, if you can just kind of get your foot in the door by just getting on set, that is probably my best tip, because, from there you can talk to people, get to know how everything works, and just kind of absorb all of that information.
Yeah. And learn those terms like you're saying of, okay, moving on, going again, turning around, second team. Like these are things that you need to know.
Yeah, and Central Casting has a blog, I think, if they still have it, and they had like a post about standing in, so you can look that up too. Or if you just Google like what is a stand-in job, there'll be more information on that too. But yeah, looking for those resources for sure.
Well, thank you so much. This was so helpful, and you did such a great job of digging deep into every aspect of this role.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. This was so fun. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Film Ladder. I hope this episode brought you one step closer to understanding the many paths through the film industry. If you like this episode, consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing with someone else also navigating their next step. Until then, keep climbing.